Joining me now to discuss more about the situation in Greece, Randolph, head of sovereign risk at IHS Global Insight. And Jan, I just want to start by picking up on the issue that was explored in that report about the IMF and the possibility of them stepping in. There seems to be a split emerging over whether or not they should be called in to assist in Greece's fiscal crisis. How do you think that might play out?
It's a very tricky issue. The IMF has been involved in Eastern Europe in conjunction with the ECB. The ECB has been orchestrating rescue packages over the last 2 years quite successfully. There are elements of stabilisation in Eastern Europe. The trouble with the IMF and Europe, this is hugely damaging for European monetary union. There's an enormous amount of political capital invested over the decades in the monetary union. And I think Europeans ought to rise up to the challenge of this crisis, and that means the institutions and also the politicians behind it. We may see coming out of this an acceleration of the cohesion that's required amongst the fiscal as well as the monetary side of the union.
It's interesting, excuse me, you say that the EU should rise to the challenge. And we've heard some conflicting voices coming from the EU. Of course, they're trying to maintain this image of consensus. But I think it was a Swedish finance minister that was saying, well, maybe the IMF should be called upon. They've done it before with Hungary and Latvia, and they have the technical knowledge and expertise to deal with a situation like this. Despite the fact that it might harm the EU's image as a kind of cohesive structure, does he have a point?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is, the Europeans should swallow a bit of pride here. I mean, the IMF has got the experience, it has got the technical know-how, and it's also got the financial muscle, particularly after the London conference last year. But it comes back to, can Europe solve its own problems? Those who are calling for the IMF are outside the Eurogroup, the Eurozone group. The Eurozone has to rise up to the challenge to back its own institutions, and in particular the ECB. It should actually give the ECB sufficient powers to deal with a situation like this, and most important, like the IMF, be prepared to backstop a country that is taking material measures in the right direction. And that's really what's required, and the ECB should be given those powers and the permission to deal with a situation like this.
But right now, they don't have those powers, do they? Because each country is in control of its own budget, and you know, you've had countries, not just Greece, but Spain and Portugal, who haven't really had much sort of fiscal discipline exercised by the EU. What happens if nothing comes out of this meeting, or if there is some sort of delay in making an announcement on Greece?
Well, I can certainly see that the market pressures will continue, and the risk of contagion is present. It comes back to the EU must rise to the challenge here. The ECB must come through this crisis.
But how difficult is that going to be?
It needs to address the key leaders, and we're essentially talking about Germany here in conjunction with, but Germany will not act alone. It will always act in a European fashion. It will need to provide a European solution for a European problem. They need to get their act together. I mean, crisis often generates this kind of accelerated reform.
Randolph, thank you very much indeed for your analysis.